The iPhone 13 Pro Max has been on the market since 2021. However, it officially hasn't been for sale at Apple stores for quite some time, a couple years actually, although it's been easy to pick this up elsewhere. And in this episode, I just kind of want to talk about 3 years later, my thoughts on if you should upgrade this coming with the 16s this year, or if you should stick it out and keep it. Let's discuss. So what is up, guys? Nick here, helping you to master your technology. And in this episode, we're going to discuss the iPhone 13 Pro Max. You know, I haven't covered this in a while in its own dedicated video, but definitely I want to talk about it today. And I always get happy covering this one because I've really enjoyed the 13 Pro Max. It's been my favorite iPhone, a large iPhone in the past several years. The 15 Pro Max has been up there, I'm not going to lie, but definitely I've loved the 13 Pro Max. First thing I want to talk about is the value, and you can see we are running the latest iOS 18 on here, so definitely have some nice features. You could tint the icons now, get all these new features set here. No Apple Intelligence, but that's going to be the case for some of the other iPhones that came after this, including the 14 models. But I want to talk about first is the value. So is this phone, was it a good value? And the answer is absolutely. If you paid the full price for this thing's a tank. This is one of those iPhones that I dropped a few times out of a case and still holds up. Strong stainless steel edges over here and a really fast CPU on the inside A15 Bionic. It is not the fastest anymore, but it was very good for the time. And because Apple did put 6 gigs of RAM, which is enough for the iOS operating system, this phone definitely ran super well basically the majority of the time, and it's clocked pretty respectably at 3.23 gigahertz. Now, I'm not going to give it all this praise and act like it's the fastest CPU out there. There are phones that are way faster now, but the overall polish feel of it, there's just nothing really super wrong that sticks out with this phone. And because of that reason, I think a lot of people loved their iPhone 13 Pro or Pro Max. All right, so 3 years later with the build quality, as a matter of fact, the build quality on this is better to me than the 15 Pro Max. It just feels more sturdy and strong even than that phone. So it's stunning. Also, the cameras, they do stick a little bit off the body though. So if you drop this on the wrong angle, you can crack the lens on there. Not easily, but definitely can do so if you hit it right on the exact angle. That's pretty much for all these newer iPhones. But definitely the stainless steel structure is super strong. It can take some bumps and bruises pretty good. And of course, any phone straight on its face from a decent height can crack glass. So I did keep a screen protector on mine. But generally speaking, this phone feels like an absolute tank. It kind of reminds me of you can get a cheaper new used car. You can get a super luxurious and sturdy older car that was just higher quality for the time. If you picked up one of these now, this would be the sturdy, luxurious older car that was just still higher quality, even though it's a little bit older. This thing is sturdy. And that's pretty much all I have to say. Design-wise, though, it's a little bit long in the tooth now. It's been out for a while. The notch has gone away to Dynamic Island, so this makes it look like a little bit of an older phone. But when you consider the fact that Apple still has notches on MacBooks, it doesn't look too out of place. It doesn't look that old. The phone just still kind of feels and looks pretty modern, pretty nice, mostly because Apple doesn't really change the design way too much. But we'll see what they do with the 16 Pro Max. That's going to be the first bigger iPhone in years. So that could be definitely making this feel a little bit older. So let's talk about the display. As you can see right here, this is a 120 hertz OLED display, and it is phenomenal. The color reproduction, the contrast ratio was superb. It was also we had an OLED display on the iPhone 11 Pro Max, 10s Max, as well as the 12 Pro Max. But this one, what it really changed the game with was it was brighter than those older panels. In addition to that, it had a much smoother 120 hertz refresh. Now, you don't really notice it here in this display sample that I'm showcasing to you here, but where you really notice it is in just kind of the scrolling overall, just generally going through the phone. And I think having 120 hertz actually made this phone's display feel more up to date for a longer period of time, which is why I still really like the iPhone 13 Pro Max now, is because even some phones like the iPhone 15 do not have a 120 hertz. So that makes this even more desirable option than some of those. As a matter of fact, they probably would get a 14 Pro Max or 13 Pro Max over like a 14 Plus for example, just because of that 120 hertz. It's that important to me, not to everybody, but definitely that 120 hertz just made the overall phone experience really good. So display wise, they also increased the nits this year. So when the 13 Pro Max came out, this got much brighter. And even now, while these phones are getting ridiculously brighter than before, this still holds its own. It's still pretty good. And it could pass for a flagship option here, I think, even now in 2024. Although they are going 2,000, 3,000, they're just getting ridiculous now. This phone was still pretty legible in most environments, even in 2021. So software, let's talk about it. iOS 18 brings a lot of nice customizations, and of course the Apple Intelligence is going to come to the newer phones. So for those who like to be on the bleeding edge of the Apple ecosystem, you definitely have to go 15 Pro or higher. But I will say that the iOS 18 is still going to make this phone feel pretty fresh here next month when they launch the official version, and we're pretty much through the beta process. I think we have like one more to the RC, and we'll be basically on to official. But everything is still going to feel modern. You're just going to have not those rewrite features, the new Siri. Some of those Apple Intelligence things are definitely going to be a little bit behind here. So if that matters to you, you might want to do the upgrade and keep it, or not keep it, but do the upgrade this year. But if you don't care about that, you might just want to keep it. Because iOS 18 is still going to freshen things up here for iPhone 13 Pro Max. We do have now the ability to put icons wherever we want on the screen, which is a pretty cool new take for Apple. Finally, we could put icons wherever we want on screen, and you could customize these to dark mode. It's just a really nice, freshened experience, but we still don't have a split screen on this software. And we do have a new control center, which definitely cleans things up, makes it look a little bit more fresh and modern. Some people don't like it, but I tend to prefer it. I like this new control center. I think it looks fresher than ever before. But you still don't have split screen. So big phone, still no split screen. And I don't think we're going to see it on the next one either. But yeah, so software, it's still probably got 2 years or so left on it. So I wouldn't be concerned about that. You can still keep it out, but it's all about the Apple Intelligence. That's the deciding factor whether to upgrade or not when it comes to software. All right, so let's talk about performance. And you know I've speed tested this phone multiple times. It's always done very well. In pretty much all areas, it does well, including gaming, launching basic apps, even video editing, because you're doing it on a mobile OS, on iMovie, which is very well optimized, works fantastic, as does things like Luma Fusion. This phone just performs well in pretty much all tasks. And even because it has 6 gigs of RAM, it can hold most of the applications very well in the background. So you're not really going to have too many reloads or anything like that when relaunching applications. So very happy still with performance. And because this is a lighter OS and it doesn't require tons of RAM, and it's just held up good. So very nice performance here. And I think it's so crazy because back in the day, we would have like a 5S or a 5, and those phones would start getting really slow because they had less RAM. But now, if you buy an iPhone now, even in 3 years, because of the faster CPUs they have now and the faster RAM, these phones last longer and still feel fast longer. So you are very lucky in this current time versus how it used to be. Very nice performance here, and I would still easily say keep this if you don't care about Apple Intelligence. You can still keep this. It's definitely going to be really good for the next year or two. So discussing the camera, the video on here is still fantastic. The quality is amazing. And I really just don't have a major issue. Even when you like zoom in on objects and stuff like that, they're pretty decent. I mean, of course, you get close, really close. You could see the noise, but this camera is just a really good consumer-based camera. And it does a fantastic job with people and even the details in the background, the dynamic range, all that stuff. It does a really fantastic job in this area. So even now in 2024, this is the only camera I feel like most people would need in terms of quality. The video quality. Like, what more do we need here? Like, yes, it got even better, but how much so? I think the average person probably couldn't even see difference in video quality between this and one of the newer ones unless they pixel peeped. And this was me playing with the iPad mini on the plane. You could see it feels like I'm right there. That's how crispy the video quality is on this phone. So 13 Pro Max, man, super win here. Super thumbs up overall. And in the layout, it's pretty much the same as the prior or even the newer ones here in terms of the layout. What I really love about the 13 Pro Max's camera though is it's something small that you don't really pay attention to until you have like a 14 Pro Max. So what I'm talking about is when you punch in to zoom, there's no like background blur or anything like that. Everything is always in focus and very easily. There is one thing though, the macro mode. You can turn that feature off, but it will switch cameras when you go macro. But overall, I mean, I'm super impressed still with this camera. I would easily recommend purchasing this phone if you cared about camera and you wanted a good deal on a phone. Still has software updates, still has amazing cameras, great performance. It's just an all-around winner still. And if you want to know about 3 years later, should you upgrade or keep it? It comes down to one element. Do you want more zoom? This is 15 times. The newer ones are going to go further. And do you want maybe a little bit more HDR effect? This new AI processing stuff and what Apple's doing with the cameras definitely make things a little sharper. If you want that and you want a few more pro features, you'll want to do the upgrade, but you gotta want those niche pro features for it to really matter. Now in the area of battery life, yes, I'm still at 100 capacity because I used this phone for about a full year and then I switched over to the 14 Pro Max, so it didn't really knock it too much. But the battery on iOS 18 definitely drains faster. This is beta though, so I can't really comment fully on that, but I will say that the battery life on this phone has remained strong throughout its usage, especially on official software, so I'm pretty happy to report that. I do think some of the later softwares took a little bit of a hit on my battery. The original one this came with was really, really strong, but some of the newer softwares like 17 weren't quite as good. I started to get like 45 minutes less, but overall the phone still was much better than the base iPhones and some other newer iPhones that are coming out now. Definitely are getting good again, but this one was such a good battery life phone, and I hope that Apple returns to glory with the 16 Pro Max like the 13 Pro Max was on battery. And the audio performance is good as well. This is my previous Z Fold 6 review on my second channel. You could check that out at the More Nick Ackerman channel, but take a listen. And has had it since day one. I'm going to go ahead and give you my full honest user review. Now, just because I review phones on YouTube, it definitely is very, very loud, and I don't think anyone's going to have a real issue with this. I do think the newer phones got more bassy. They just sound a little bit crisper at the highs, but this was not bad at all, and it's still a very strong speaker set here. You'll notice a lot of fingerprints there on the edges. I should have talked about that. The newer phones definitely don't show. So if you're a little OCD about that, you'll definitely like the newer stuff a little bit more. But audio-wise, coming out the top and the bottom, it has been a thumbs up for sure. All right, so let me talk about the phone call quality and connectivity. This was one of the better years for iPhone as well. I know I sound like I'm praising everything, but it actually was. 5G was strong here, and phone call quality was strong as well. It was not as good as the Samsung phones of this time, but it was still very, very acceptable. So I didn't have a major issue here. This is not an area I would say you got to upgrade for. So conclusion, let me conclude it here. I've had this thing since launch. It's going to be 3 years literally next month. It's crazy how fast time goes. I feel like I was just praising the 13 Pro Max as if it was yesterday, but it's not. It was 3 years ago already. And for those who are looking to use iOS 18 to its full potential with the Apple Intelligence, you'll definitely want to upgrade. However, if you just want a really nice premium iPhone experience and you want to pick one of these up, these at low prices are still a good deal. You could find these things on eBay for under $600. So they're definitely a pretty good deal right now. They're half the price of a newer iPhone, and you're still going to be able to enjoy iOS 18, a 120 hertz display, really good cameras, and at least 2 to 3 years more of support on this phone. So it's all down to the Apple Intelligence. If you don't want that, this is still a definite keep. And if you're okay with just using like ChatGPT or something separated from the Apple Intelligence, like an unknown AI-based platform like over here, you can still play around with some cloud-based AI stuff without using Apple Intelligence and just upgrade later when maybe an iPhone Air or Slim comes or they get an all new design or something like that. So yeah, that's my final take on it 3 years later. Apple Intelligence, you want to try the latest, and you'll definitely want to upgrade. And if you're okay with the rest of the stuff, I think it's still a keep for at least a year or two. Of course, everyone's going to have some people are going to have an itch to upgrade anyway. And I will be doing a comparison between this and the 16 Pro Max. So be subscribed for that. I also will do a speed test. So be subscribed for that. So if you are still itching to upgrade, I will be putting them head to head. Hope to see you there. I'll catch you on the next one. Nick here. Be sure to be well and peace.